Hi all. Recently engaged to my long-term boyfriend, and I'm having some doubts about going through with the wedding. He's a very sweet, kind, intelligent guy, and we've had a lovely relationship. For some reason, though, I'm finding myself really struggling to envision myself on my wedding day. I've obviously communicated these anxieties and concerns to him, and he's been very understanding and patient. But I find myself going back and forth. He's told me that he appreciates my honesty and we have solid communication, all things considered. The main reason I've been having some anxiety about our relationship is somewhat linked to a challenge I thought we'd worked through. But in reality, I think I may simply be in denial. He comes from a very big family that is very tightly knit, and every time I'm with them, I feel as though I'm a guest in a big clan. They somewhat have a bit of a tribe-like, clan-like mentality. His parents live about 6 hours away via plane. My fiancé moved back in with his parents after graduation and stayed there a few years before joining me where I was living, studying for law school. None of that is a problem in itself, but the first time we introduced our families, I noticed that his parents were not particularly interested in learning about my family and almost exclusively spoke of themselves. They also have this habit of booking family vacations / holiday plans without consulting with my fiancé and me, and then expect us to make their plans / schedules work, and are not very understanding if we can only join for portions of trips. I'm always happy to see them, but after a few days with them, I always end up with somewhat of a bad feeling. I can also tell that his parents aren't particularly thrilled with some of his lifestyle changes he's adopted since we've moved in together. None of which I've enforced on him, but which he says he's been inspired by / happy to take on. He's now a vegetarian, and his mother always makes snide comments about whether he's feeding himself decently. We recently saw them for a week for a Christmas vacation in Mexico. He and I had plans to take PTO to go see my parents for my dad's 60th birthday around early January. We were going to take him to visit NYC, as he had always wanted to visit. I only recently learned that he, in fact, hadn't told his parents about this trip, and they told us that we were invited to join them, his aunt, uncles, cousins, nieces, grandmother, in Mexico for a week. We thanked them profusely, and I told him it would be great if we could make it work alongside the trip we'd planned a bit later to see my family. I also told him I wasn't comfortable not paying for my place and would want to know how much it would cost. We told them we were interested in joining, but would get back to them about the number of days we could join, only to learn they'd booked us for the entire time, not complaining. It was very sweet of them, but made it hard, and my fiancé has to abridge the days he'd be joining me and my family. He was also a little upset about the poor communication, but never asked them about how much the trip cost. He said he assumed that meant we were invited / our seats paid for. The trip itself goes smoothly. We are all staying in the same hotel, same floor. We meet up every day for dinner and sometimes lunch and activities. It's a big family, and the age range is quite vast. We go on a few day trips with the family. All in all, I am under the impression that we are having an enjoyable time. We come home from the trip, have some downtime, then go see my parents. Everything goes well, and we come home. When I'm home, my fiancé tells me that it isn't fair that while we were with my parents, 4 days, we spent the time there together and exploring NYC, while when we were in Mexico with his, we had a lot of downtime and spent a lot of it swimming / reading by the pool, the two of us. I told him I had no idea he was unhappy about the time repartition for the trip. He then explained that his parents wished they'd had more quality time with him. So I asked if I should have simply not joined. We were there essentially 9 days, including travel days, and had all meals together except breakfast, and never declined plans to be with them. He then tells me his mother asked him to come back home, his parents' home, after said Mexico vacation, as she was under the impression he wasn't joining my family and me in NYC, and that she missed him terribly. I got quite upset, as our trip with my parents had been booked a long time prior, and that it wasn't my responsibility to communicate with his mother. The craziest thing is we'd seen them 3 weeks prior when we met up in a halfway city for a weekend, the weekend he ended up proposing to me on. And that even during that weekend, he didn't take the time to have our proposal be intimate, just the two of us, and included his family, even though I'd told him I wanted it to be a private, intimate event. I also can't seem to shake off the feeling that his family simply doesn't like me that much. It's almost like me having my own family and identity bothers them when we're all together. Not that I speak only about my family or go against the current in any way. My fiancé told me that I embarrass them by bringing up topics that I know no one is knowledgeable about, so as to humiliate them, which is furthest from the truth. They aren't big conversationalists, but I love to talk about different things: art, culture, history, current events, nothing political or contentious. I think his family is upset that I am different from them in that way, but I found it very insulting that he asked me to tone down being myself simply because his family members couldn't converse with me during the numerous meals we shared together. I also am worried that if my relationship with my in-laws is fragile before marriage, I don't want to sign up for an entire lifetime of stress. I really don't want my future children to see my and my husband fighting about in-laws, and I'd want to be appreciated by the family I marry into. I also only recently found out that my fiancé did in fact forward $2,000 to his family after this Christmas vacation, but didn't tell me about it until now. I wish I had known in advance how much it would cost and don't understand why he didn't ask them as I'd asked him to originally. Any advice on this matter? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Enmeshment. This is a codependent family, and your fiancé has no idea what boundaries look like. I'm assuming if he ever tries to put his foot down, he'll be guilt-tripped, shamed, and cut off. This is a form of emotional abuse. He doesn't realize it, but he didn't have healthy boundaries growing up, and that messes up a person. I won't necessarily say run, but this is much bigger than you think. Just look at posts on r/justnomil. Get counseling before you set a date. See if he can start working on his issues, and maybe you'll learn how to help him with that, and maybe it will work. But remember, this goes deep. So even if he does start working on it, like an addict, he will struggle and fall off the wagon. Some things he is just not going to understand, and all of it is going to affect you. Are you ready for that challenge? Comment 2. Your boyfriend seems to agree with you, but then gets upset because his parents don't like something. That's a him problem to solve, and since he's laying that at your doorstep, the only way you can fix it is to not play the game. Ending the engagement is the quick and easy way out. You could put in a few more years with him, with therapy and couples counseling, but really, do you have any respect for him left after this? Do you want to invest more time with a dishonest man? My ex-husband agreed with me all the time. Do you like this? Do you think this is a good idea? I thought we were very compatible. No idiots here. Seems he just didn't want to fight, which of course was a surprise to me. He just built up resentment and felt like a martyr. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the advice and comments on my last post. I've had a whirlwind few days, and there have been some major developments that I need to get off my chest. So after I found out about the $2,000 my fiancé sent to his family, I confronted him about it. I was expecting an apology, maybe an explanation, but what I got was a bombshell. He admitted that he didn't tell me because he knew I'd be upset. But that wasn't all. He also confessed that his mother had been pressuring him to break things off with me, and the money was a sort of peace offering to get her off his back. I was floored. His mother's disapproval wasn't news to me, but I never imagined she'd go to such lengths. I remembered how she'd always been cold to me, how she'd subtly criticized my career ambitions, and how she'd made snide remarks about my family's modest background. It all made sense now. She saw me as an outsider, someone who didn't fit into their family's way of life. The betrayal stung. I thought back to the weekend he proposed, how he'd made it a family affair despite knowing I wanted it to be just us. It was clear his family's wishes always came first. I felt like a fool for not seeing it sooner. But the drama didn't end there. The next day, his sister called me. She'd always been the one member of his family who seemed to be on my side. She spilled that their mother had been bad-mouthing me to the entire family, painting me as an opportunist who was trying to take her son away from them. She even suggested that I was the reason he'd become a vegetarian, as if I had some sort of mind control over him. I was seething. How could they twist his personal choices into something sinister? I remembered all the times I'd supported him in his decisions, how I'd encouraged him to pursue his passions, even when they were different from mine. It was like none of that mattered to them. The confrontation with my fiancé was inevitable. I asked him why he'd let his mother's words affect our relationship, why he'd hidden the truth from me. He looked defeated, torn between his loyalty to his family and his love for me. He admitted he was scared of losing them, but he also didn't want to lose me. I was torn. I loved him, but could I really marry into a family that would never accept me? Could I spend my life with someone who couldn't stand up for me? I thought about our future children, about the kind of environment they'd grow up in. It was a sobering thought. In the midst of all this, I remembered the trip to Mexico, how his family had booked the entire vacation without consulting us, how they'd expected us to drop everything to be with them. It was a pattern of control that I couldn't ignore. And then there was the trip with my family that he'd almost missed because of his mother's demands. It was clear that his family's needs would always come before mine, before ours. It was a painful realization, but I couldn't deny it any longer. I needed some space to think, so I went to stay with a friend for a few days. My fiancé was upset, but he understood. Or at least, I thought he did. That's when I got a call from his aunt, the one who'd always been particularly fond of me. She told me that his family was planning an intervention of sorts, to convince him to end things with me for good. I couldn't believe it. They were actively working to break us up. It was like something out of a soap opera, only it was my life. I felt betrayed, not just by his mother, but by him for not standing up to her, for not defending our relationship. I haven't decided what to do yet. I'm still processing everything, still trying to figure out if our relationship can survive this level of interference from his family. It's a lot to take in, and I'm just trying to take it one day at a time. Husband wants an open relationship, but I'm monogamous. Now he's in love with his coworker, who's actually his ex from college. I don't know what to do. My husband, let's refer to him as H, and I have been together for 10 years, married for 8 years, and have a child who is 6 years old. We have been happy overall, but now we don't know what to do anymore. H has always been vocal that he would like to have an open relationship. I am strictly monogamous. Since I told him I wouldn't want that, he said it isn't that big of a deal for him, but if I ever changed my mind, he would be happy. The biggest problem we have is that I need time to spend by myself, and he would love to spend every second with me. We have been talking about it and always working on making each other as happy as possible, given that we have different needs and want them to be as fulfilled as possible. We were fine and happy for a long time. Sometimes we talked about having a crush on someone, and that was it. But at the end of December, he told me that he had a crush on a coworker of his. No big deal. We talked about it, and during the Christmas break, he told me he is losing feelings for her. Well, after the Christmas break, he had those feelings again, and this time, the coworker was going through a crisis at home, separated from her husband, and H and I were helping her. I think his feelings deepened in this situation, but I told him I wasn't happy and wanted him to draw a line. He did. But yesterday, he confessed that he was hoping that there could be more between them and that he really liked forming a connection of that kind. He said that he thinks that he might be polyamorous, and he really enjoyed forming that connection, and he doesn't think that he will be able to be strictly monogamous anymore. He also emphasized that I am the most important person in the world, and he doesn't really grasp why I am this hurt since he felt even closer to me than before. And he is more interested in forming a romantic relationship with someone else than having a man-intimacy relationship. He wasn't even physically attracted to said coworker. The past few weeks were a little draining for me since I supported him through his feelings and his heartbreak, and I don't know if I can do this again. We are at a crossroads where we don't know what to do anymore. The thought of him forming a relationship like we have with someone else hurts me deeply, and he can't go back to how it was before. It hasn't felt like this before when he had a crush, but we really want to work through this since we share a deep love for each other. Does anybody know what we could do or how we could navigate? Feel free to ask questions. I don't think that I was able to put everything in this post since it is a very complex and nuanced situation. We are working together to resolve this problem, but it is a process. I want to thank the helpful comments, and I really want to tell you that I've never, not even for 1 second, felt like he has cheated on me. And I'm not going to feel that way because you tell me that. I might update you in a few days or weeks, but we will see. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. This is one of the things where it's either a yes or no deal. One veto is enough, and you not being happy about it is a veto. Don't let him coerce you into this. You were honest with him, and now he tries to change who you are and what you want. As others mentioned, he is already emotionally cheating. He can talk as much as he wants about being pro-polyamory, but he decided that he is okay with a monogamous relationship. He had a chance to walk away, and he didn't. And now he wants both, a child and another partner. This is cruel to you and is hurting your relationship. By the way, what does the colleague think of all of this? Comment 2. This is cheating. I'm polyamorous and this is not it. He's just having an emotional affair and trying to spin it so you believe it's okay. When my relationship was only open and not polyamorous, for example, we could only do no strings attached things. I met up with someone named A twice. By the second time, I knew if I saw them again, there would be feelings. I spoke to my partner about whether he'd like to do polyamory, and if he said no, I would have ended it with A immediately. The key to any sort of non-monogamy is communication, trust, consent, and boundaries. This is not that. He's just steamrolling you here. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around after my last post. I know a lot of you were invested in what's been happening with H and me, so here's the update you've been waiting for. After I last wrote, things took a turn I never expected. H and I had been trying to work through our issues, but then I found out something that shook me to my core. It turns out that H's coworker, the one he had a crush on, was actually his ex-girlfriend from college. I couldn't believe he hadn't told me this before. It felt like a betrayal, and it made me question everything. Back when we were dating, H had mentioned this girl he dated in college, but he always made it seem like it was nothing serious. Now, finding out that she was the same person he was getting close to again, it was like a punch in the gut. I remembered how he used to talk about their hectic adventures and how they had this intense connection. I couldn't help but feel like I was living in her shadow, even after all these years. H tried to explain that he didn't think it was important to mention because they had both moved on and he didn't want to upset me. But the fact that he hid it made it so much worse. We had a huge argument, and I told him that I needed some space to think. During the next couple of days, I stayed with my sister. She's always been my rock, and she reminded me of how H had been there for me when I lost my job a few years back. He had been so supportive, and it was hard to reconcile that man with the one who had kept such a big secret from me. Meanwhile, H was sending me texts and emails, trying to explain his feelings. He said that being around his ex brought back memories, but it also made him realize how much he valued our life together. He insisted that he didn't want to lose me or our family. I was torn. Part of me wanted to forgive him, but another part was furious and hurt. I decided to meet with him to talk things through. When we sat down, H was visibly nervous. He told me that he had ended all contact with his coworker and that he wanted to go to couples therapy. He was willing to do whatever it took to make things right. The therapy sessions were tough. We dug into our past, our fears, and our insecurities. I learned that H had always struggled with the idea of being tied down to one person, but he also loved the stability and love that our family provided. It was a constant battle for him, and he was genuinely sorry for the pain he had caused. As we worked through our issues, I realized that I had been neglecting some of my own needs in the relationship. I had always been the one to compromise, to give H the attention he craved, but I hadn't been taking enough time for myself. Therapy helped us to see that we both had to make changes. Just when I thought we were making progress, another shocker dropped. A's coworker reached out to me. She was apologetic and said she never meant to come between us. She also revealed that she had been going through a tough time with her separation and that H had been a great friend to her. But she admitted that she had developed feelings for him too. I was floored. It was one thing for H to have a crush, but to know that she felt the same way was a whole new level of hurt. I confronted H, and he broke down. He admitted that he had felt torn between us, but he swore that nothing physical had happened. The next few days were a blur. I was trying to process everything, and H was doing everything he could to prove his commitment to me. He started planning date nights, taking on more responsibilities with our child, and being more open about his feelings. And then, just when I thought we might be able to get past this, I found out I was pregnant. It was a shock, to say the least. H and I hadn't been trying for another child, but this unexpected news forced us to really think about our future. We're still figuring things out, but this pregnancy has made us both realize how much we have to lose. H has been attentive and caring, and I can see he's trying to make amends. We've decided to keep going to therapy and to take it one day at a time. Dad announces he's dating someone after Mom dies and then drops bombshell he's getting married. Oh boy, I'm his best man. My mom died in November of 2021. She battled cancer for about 5 years before she finally succumbed to it. It was rough. My parents had lived away for most of that time and decided to move closer in the last few months of her life. I have 3 kids, and my daughter, who is 11 years old, did not take it well. My mom and dad have never been close with my kids. My parents have basically lived across the country for most of my adult life, which means I haven't been close with my parents in years. It was their choice, and that's fine, but they definitely have missed out on getting to know their grandchildren. My daughter, who is 11, has had a difficult time dealing with my mom's death. I think it's more about what never was than grieving what she had. She is currently in therapy for a few reasons and has recently been having nightmares that my mom is a part of. It's been tough on her, but we are trying to help her through it. My other 2 children, who are 9 and 3, haven't really had any issues. They were younger, and my 9-year-old has few memories of my mom. My dad called me about 3 weeks ago and asked me how I felt about him dating. I told him I just wanted him to be happy. He then told me he had gone out to dinner with someone that he and my mom had known and went to school with. I didn't really think much of it. It was weird, and I definitely needed to process it a bit, but I understood and wasn't mad at him. About 3 days after calling me, he posted a picture of himself and this woman on social media. I was kind of flabbergasted at that point. It blew me away that after one day, they were posting pictures together. I didn't say anything to him about it. Over the weekend, he asked us to come to his house because we hadn't seen him since before Christmas. We went, and he informed me that the new woman would be there and we could meet her. He made sure it was okay with us, but I feel like she would have come no matter what. It went fine. She was nice enough. Fast forward to today. My dad asked me to call him. Weird because we don't talk often. I called him, and immediately upon answering, he blurts out that he's getting married. I literally laughed at him. He told me he wasn't joking and is getting married on February 24th. I continued to laugh and told him to please just text me the details. I didn't know how to react. I'm not mad at him. I am just amazed at how quickly he's decided to jump into this. My dad has 3 kids still in high school living at home. This woman has a 20-something-year-old son with 2 kids and a wife living with her. I can't imagine my dad has really thought of the ramifications of everything. I am going to have to go home tonight and explain to my kids what is happening. Obviously, my 3-year-old won't care, but the other 2 will have questions. My daughter, who is 11, is going to be so confused. How can I make this easy on my kids without making things worse? Realistically, we maybe see my dad once every 5 or 6 weeks, and he and my kids aren't close. I just know my daughter is going to question this. Just wanted to add a couple things to this. I really appreciate all the input and the advice. I didn't expect this to really go anywhere, and really just hoped that typing the words out would help out some. I talked to my kids yesterday because I kept getting calls and texts from my siblings, and it was really hard to hide it. So they realized something was going on. Both of my older kids had questions and concerns. I laid out the facts. I tried to be neutral about it. They both were so confused. I told them they could call my dad and talk to him, and maybe it would help. Both decided against that because he will just blow us off. Anyway, just wanted to add a couple of things that I left out of my original post. I also have a 30-year-old brother and a 22-year-old sister, neither of whom lives with my dad. I spoke to both of them yesterday to get their feelings on the subject. Both were very put off by how quickly my dad went from dating to announcing his marriage. My sister feels like she can't say anything to my dad because she still relies on him financially. My brother was much harsher. I also spoke to my younger siblings that live in the house. Two of them called me yesterday to ask if my dad was joking because they couldn't believe it. My 16-year-old sister is very upset that my dad is moving someone in that they don't know. She told me it makes no sense why my dad would move in a stranger. Also, to add some more context, my 4 younger siblings are all adopted. The youngest are 15. They were adopted when they were 6. I already had 2 kids at this point. My parents were not ready to be grandparents, so they adopted more children because they claim it's what God wanted them to do and because it made them feel younger. I understand that some people pointed out that I seem resentful towards my parents for not being very good grandparents while having minor children at home. I definitely have had to battle this for a long time. They had grandchildren and decided to adopt and put their grandchildren on the back burner. I'm not upset with these kids for being adopted or for needing attention or being around and part of the family. I guess it was a selfish feeling on my part in wanting my parents to be more involved in my kids' lives, and they couldn't be because they were raising more kids. I also wanted to touch on people commenting on my parents living across the country. My dad has always had really good jobs when I was a kid growing up, but he traveled a lot. When I was around 19 or so, he found a job within 15 minutes of home, making excellent money. They were not content with this and decided to move across the country for a different job with him making a little more money. They decided to move when I was 21. My daughter was born when I was 22. My son was born 2 years later. The following year is when they decided to adopt my 2 youngest siblings. I really appreciate everybody chiming in. I'm going to give this a day or two and see how I feel and then reach out to my dad to talk further about it. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. When my dad started dating after my mom died, my godfather told me that it means he misses the comfort and love of being married and reflects the love he had. If he had been miserable, he wouldn't want to try again. He never minced words. If he has known this woman for a long time, which it sounds like he has, then it is probably true that he started dating, or at least communicating with her, much sooner than he told you. I would tell your daughter that your grandpa loved her grandma, but she has been gone for 2 years. This will be a different love, as they won't have all the life experiences together, and that's okay. It doesn't mean he isn't still grieving, but he is moving forward. Comment 2. The woman is an old friend, so he already knew her pretty well. I'm also guessing they were secretly dating longer than he told you because he didn't know how you'd take it. It's not uncommon for people whose spouses die to remarry fairly quickly. They're not used to being single and didn't want to be single, but things happened. There's nothing to be confused about. He's grieved and is now moving on with his life. He deserves happiness and shouldn't have to be alone to make other people feel comfortable. Just tell your daughter that he's grieved your mother and is now moving on, like she would want. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the support on my last post. It's been a wild couple of weeks and I've got some updates that I'm still trying to wrap my head around. So, after I talked to my kids about my dad's sudden wedding plans, things took an even crazier turn. My daughter, who's been struggling with my mom's passing and the whole situation, decided she wanted to talk to my dad after all. She called him, and I could tell by the look on her face that the conversation didn't go well. She hung up and just started crying. Apparently, my dad told her that life moves on and that she should be happy for him. She felt dismissed. And honestly, I was fuming. A few days later, my dad's fiancé reached out to me. She wanted to have a heart-to-heart, just the two of us. I agreed, thinking maybe I could understand their rush into marriage. We met at a local coffee shop, and she dropped a shocker on me. She's pregnant. I almost spit out my coffee. She's in her late 40s, and my dad is in his early 60s. She explained that it was a total surprise, and they wanted to get married before the baby arrived. I was stunned. I mean, my dad's going to be a dad again, and I'm going to have a sibling younger than my own kids. I went home and had to think about how to tell my siblings. My 30-year-old brother was shocked, to say the least. He's always been the one to speak his mind, and he didn't hold back, saying our dad was being irresponsible. My 22-year-old sister was quieter, but admitted she felt like our family was becoming a reality show. Meanwhile, my younger siblings living at home were in an uproar. The 15-year-old twins were feeling like their stable home life was being upended. They had just gotten used to the idea of their mom being gone, and now this. My 16-year-old sister was the most vocal, saying she felt like she was losing her dad to a stranger and now a new baby. In the midst of all this, my daughter's nightmares got worse. She started acting out at school, getting into arguments with her teachers. Her therapist suggested that the news might be triggering her fears of abandonment. It broke my heart to see her like this. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, my dad called a family meeting. He wanted to clear the air. We all gathered at his house, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. My dad and his fiancé sat us down and explained the situation. They apologized for the shock, but asked for our support. The meeting turned into a heated discussion. Voices were raised, tears were shed, and old resentments bubbled to the surface. My brother accused my dad of always putting his own needs first, while my sister broke down, admitting she felt abandoned. My younger siblings just sat there, looking lost and confused. In the end, my dad promised to do better by all of us, to be there for his new child, and not forget about the rest of us. His fiancée, tears in her eyes, said she wanted to be part of our family, not a wedge that drove us apart. As for my daughter, she's slowly coming to terms with everything. She's still hurt and confused, but she's trying to be open-minded. She even drew a picture for the baby, which I thought was a big step for her. The wedding is still set for February 24th, and it's going to be a small affair. My dad asked me to be his best man, which was a surprise. I agreed, not for him, but for the sake of family unity. It's going to be a strange day, watching my dad marry again and knowing there's going to be a new addition to the family. I'm still processing all of this. It's been a roller coaster of emotions, and I'm not sure how I feel about my dad right now. I want to support him, but I also worry about the impact on my siblings and my own kids. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.